have not seen a problem that we cannot overcome.
It is thinking outside the box. It's looking for new approaches.
Yeah, I think conceptually it's a valid idea.
The year is 2018. The United States government's budget problems are at their worst. 4 years of sequestration hasn't fixed the problem. Several rounds of furloughing civilians hasn't put a dent in the debt. Cut to the bone, all eyes now turn to the Department of Defense and the active duty force.
If we can do better, and we'll continue to search for ways to do better.
I urge this committee and the members of Congress to consider the full range of risks across the Joint Force, not just for my service, but for all of us.
Once considered untouchable, now thousands of soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines are being sent packing. It's a massive elimination of redundancies. The criticism falling on deaf ears. There's going to come a time when we just simply don't have enough money to provide what I believe to be the right amount of ground forces to carry out contingency operations, Army Chief of Staff General Raymond Odierno tells the media. We will have to shut down 2 air wings for 3 months each and limit 4 others to minimum levels of flying, says Navy spokesperson Rear Admiral John Kirby. In order to accomplish the mission, joint is the new name of the game. Across the board, the services now must come together and work as one. Marines heading to assist Army missions, soldiers assisting the Air Force filling billets in the Navy. It's the only solution to the massive cutbacks. Because no single military platform, the aircraft carrier, is so dependent on people power, we examine this scenario through the eyes of the Navy. To crew the ship, it takes nearly 5,000 people, billets that can be filled with an all-joint crew. Sailors on the bridge, the Air Force operating drones off the flight deck, soldiers in the Combat Information Center, and Marines maintaining security. This is USS Joint, and if the concept sounds far-fetched, think again. Some scholars say this is the future.
The first advantage is probably fiscal. The second one is to be able to draw the cultures closer together, to acculturate between the services. By working together, they understand each other and they understand how to help each other. And so the last advantage is probably that of gaining an asymmetric advantage, because our enemy doesn't necessarily know how to fight like that. And we're able to bring the best of all worlds together to capitalize on expertise where it resides, not just choosing somebody because of their service, but choosing them because of their expertise.
Dr. Fred Kinley teaches at the Joint Forces Staff College in Norfolk, Virginia, a component of the National Defense University, which educates military officers in the planning and education of joint, multinational, and interagency operations. The director of the program doesn't see a day when all branches of the military are merged into one giant joint force.
Because of the history and tradition of each of the services and the politics and the political backing.
But he does agree a merge is in the military's evolutionary DNA, and the concept of an all-joint crew manning a ship like USS Joint could work.
The evolution of the joint force from deconflicted to coordinated to now integrated, and we're almost past integrated to interdependent. I think you would find that you could get to that interdependentness with a joint crew, much like you do with an all single service crew.
While sailing the seas with a joint crew may sound revolutionary, it isn't. This is USNS Comfort, one of 2 hospital ships used by the U.S. Navy. Its mission is to provide rapid, flexible, and mobile medical and surgical services to U.S. military forces worldwide. She also visits less developed partner nations, offering free medical services and assists in response to natural disasters. Under the command of Navy Medicine, Comfort goes to sea with a joint medical team.
Army veterinarians, Air Force nursing staff, support staff, Army surgeons, everyone would fall under the purview of the commanding officer of the medical treatment facility, which is Navy.
More than 200 medical professionals representing the Army, Navy, and Air Force, working together as one team while they work to save lives, diagnose diseases, and immunize thousands. A second joint team works together to navigate the ship. Civilian mariners and Navy sailors working side by side, while on the bridge, a U.S. naval officer serves as the ship's commanding officer. What it takes to make this joint effort work is this.
It's all about education of each other's requirements, and I think that sometimes is key, is defining the requirements so that whatever service or civilian, military, understand those requirements and can collaborate, work together in achieving those goals.
But despite the success of her mission, the success of her joint crew's ability to seamlessly operate together, comfort is still dependent on money. She's been sitting here pierside for more than a year. Her last deployment canceled due to a lack of funding. Goodwill missions may be getting cut, but you can't cut mission-essential assets like subtenders and fleet replenishment oilers, which resupply U.S. warships at sea. These ships, like the Comfort, are run by MSC, or Military Sealift Command. Of their 126 ships, more than a dozen now operate with hybrid crews of sailors and civilians.
I'll tell you the truth, I don't like the word hybrid because it's a misnomer. It's one ship, one force is really what we're all about.
By replacing 15 officers and 370 enlisted sailors with civilians, MSC saves $14 million in manpower across their fleet. For the Navy, it's an additional savings of $80 million over 8 years.
When we put a mariner is a wall-to-wall cost, so it's all included cost. Direct, indirect cost, there is no any further cost other than what we actually charge the Navy.
Nuclear powered or not, big ships or small, surface or under the waves, Azario says a joint crew of sailors and civilians across all platforms just makes sense.
I would say that if you have the right mix and you have the right complement, you have a good operating manual and you have a good definition of issues, I have not seen a problem that we cannot overcome.
A hybrid crew has other benefits beyond money. MSC mariners are older, more experienced. They show up at the ship fully qualified and serve as mentors to their active duty shipmates. Most Navy sailors earn their qualifications while underway, which takes away from the mission. And MSC mariners stay with the same ship throughout the life of that ship, knowing it inside and out. Active duty sailors traditionally rotate to the next command after 2 to 3 years. And there's other examples of successful integration. Launched in 2001, USS Joint Venture served for 5 years, supporting a joint command, Combined Joint Task Force Horn of Africa. The ship could ferry up to 325 combat personnel and 400 tons of cargo at speeds up to 40 knots. In 2008, the Stiletto, with an all-Army-Navy joint crew, deployed on a 70-day mission for U.S. Southern Command as part of a joint agency operation that also included the Coast Guard and Drug Enforcement Administration. While there are no documented examples of warships deploying with a joint crew, on the land, the concept has been proven again and again successfully through more than a decade of war in Iraq and Afghanistan.
My expertise on a Navy vessel probably isn't so great, but if I could use an analogy, my experience on a provincial reconstruction team is pretty current and pretty relevant. And when I trained the Iraqi forces as the Chief of Staff of the Coalition Military Assistance Training Team, I found a completely joint force was exactly what I needed. Our engineers were all Air Force Red Horse. Our medics were all independent duty corpsmen. Most of our trainers were Army, but a good portion of our trainers, our MIT teams, were composed of Marines as well. The diversity of services, everybody brought their specialty together. And so we saw that increased our potentiality, it increased what we were able to do. And quite frankly, I don't see why that couldn't apply to different structures, to different platforms, to different methodologies that are equally as challenging.
The Department of Defense is facing a defense cuts conundrum, a joint issue affecting every branch. Army claims budget cuts put it at high risk. Report calls on the Air Force to cut active duty F-35 program. Navy must look very hard at aircraft carrier cuts. Pentagon could cut 100,000 plus troops. And public pressure is also mounting. Education more important than defense spending in 2013. Cut the defense budget to save our country. The only answer to reducing the force while maintaining fighting power is sharing people and their expertise.
The biggest capability that the other services can bring to the Army is their strategic lift assets. It's already been integrated into our operations around the world. I believe that by bringing them more into our day-to-day operations, learning more and more how we operate, we can make those systems even better.
From a fighter pilot perspective, I think the most important thing that the Air Force can provide for us is strategic fuel. So aerial refueling, we just do not have that capacity organically within the aircraft carrier Stryker.
I think it's already or occurring to get some of the Army as well as Navy radars that are contributing to some of the space situational awareness for the space catalog.
Back out at sea with the Navy, there is no technology more advanced than the submarine. It takes years of hard training to qualify to work here. Would a joint crew work hundreds of feet below the surface?
As long as the training pipeline was modified to include those personnel prior to them actually getting to the submarine, I could see that working. In particular, the Air Force, with their emphasis on technical training, I could especially see that happening, because electronic systems are electronic systems, whether it's on an aircraft or a ship or a submarine. It's just a matter of learning that specific system once you actually start working on it.
Cruising the surface, the Navy's Steel Curtain. Cruisers, destroyers, littoral combat ships, deterring aggression and maintaining freedom of the seas. Would a joint crew work here?
I don't believe that it matters what color uniform they're wearing. I think it matters what kind of training and combat skills they have.
Lieutenant Commander Andrea Slow is a year out from becoming the executive officer of USS Porter and says she would welcome a joint crew with one condition: proper training.
Medical training, for instance, in San Antonio, Texas, has been recently consolidated. I think that's some huge gains. You know, combat medicine, the human body doesn't care what service you're in, it just needs treatment. We start to disperse a little bit when it comes to, I think, the combat ratings, the fire controlmen. The Aegis weapon system is one that comes to mind. It's a very specialized niche for enlisted sailors. As long as the Army guys know what they're doing, or the Air Force guys, it doesn't really matter. Just so they're well trained and ready, I don't think it's that big of a hindrance. It probably could actually be very positive with some synergy. The Air Force and Army personnel, I would expect, have operated with other units before probably, and can help us in the joint fight. We don't just fight on the high blue seas anymore, 200 nautical miles away from shore. You know, we get a little bit closer inland. I think they could bring some valuable experience with utilizing the Air Force and the Army components that we'll be in the fight with.
We exist at the mercy of our budget. The reality of this fiscally constrained environment makes it imperative that we find new solutions to maintain our military's capacity and capabilities throughout the world. That solution is USS Joint, a concept that would solve the money and manpower problems not just for the Navy, but all branches of the military. Fully implemented across the board, this new approach would transform our service-specific operations into a truly joint force, fully integrated and capable of overcoming the next generation of challenges.